All right. So this one's been a long time coming. I wanted to give some insight on specifically how I watch and sometimes rewatch fights, how I take notes, and how I use this in class, whether I'm teaching or even training. If you're watching this casually as a fan, or you watch fights casually as a fan, this may alleviate some of the stress of quote unquote bad judging, or at least provide some clarity in their error, maybe even a better understanding overall. Now, before we start, it's important to do your research. What I mean by that is you have to understand the rule set, the location, and the style. So firstly, when I say rule set, is it Muay Thai? Is it kickboxing? Is it MMA? Is it modified rule sets? Sometimes they'll have a super fight like DJ versus Rodtang where it's part Muay Thai, part MMA. Sometimes it's grappling with striking. Sometimes it's Muay Thai rules, but it's modified. Even fighters with hundreds of fights and tons of experience still have to wear elbow pads and sometimes chest protectors in fights. Now, I've done breakdowns before where we talked about positioning and effective technique. Generally, if you hit someone and they move back or they fall out of position, that's considered an effective technique. But for the example of K1 or kickboxing rules, if you clinch for too long and the ref is about to break it up, if you hit them, it might not even count in your favor. I can't really think of another subset of sports like combat sports that may have rules that sort of create a gray area in between and sometimes can be weird for judging and scoring fights. Now, location is super important. And I want to reference back to an interview where Samart, who was one of the best, if not the best fighter coming out of the golden era, late 80s, early 90s of Muay Thai, one of the main things that he said in the interview was because judging is not standardized, because it's Muay Thai in, let's say, Thailand versus Muay Thai in Holland versus Muay Thai in the United States, for example. Because it's not standardized, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, Muay Thai really can't go anywhere. Meaning Muay Thai has a hard time growing in other places that don't have a standardized form of judging and scoring or standardized rule set of what Muay Thai is and should look like.
ทางไหนไหมคะว่าให้จับมือกันแล้วก็ร่วมกันพัฒนาหรือว่ามีการเสนอทางออกสำหรับบรรดาค่ายมวยเองไหมคะ
มันผมว่ามันยากฮะและอย่างไงพวกค่ายต่างจังหวัดอย่างเงี้ยมันก็จะเข้ามาทีมันก็ค่าใช้จ่ายแล้วเราไม่รู้จะไปประสานกันยังไงมันต้องมีใครประสานสักคนหนึ่งแล้วมาคุยกันว่าทุกวันนี้ให้คะแนนอะไรยังไงแบบไหน
Now, I can't remember if it's the same interview or if he said it at a later point, but he also mentions that Muay Thai will eventually belong to the foreigners.
นักกรรมการดูมวยไม่
มีฮะแล้วทุกวันนี้กรรมการทุกเวทีเหมือนกันหมดให้ลูกแข็งแรงเหมือนกันหมดไม่ว่าจะล่ามเนินลุมพินีช่องเจ็ดสีอ้อมน้อยทุกที่ฮะให้เหมือนกันหมดเพราะฉะนั้นมวยผมถึงบอกว่าศิลปะมวยไทยมันหายแน่นอนเพราะออกอาวุธไปมันก็ไม่ได้อะไรคือตัวนี้มันก็ต้องปั้มกันอย่างเดียวก็ผมถึงพูดตลอดว่าถ้าจะดูศิลปะแม่ไม้มวยไทยเนี่ยดูต่างชาติเถอะอย่ามาดูมวยไทย
Now, gambling and betting has a major influence on Muay Thai in Thailand. In fact, if you watch fights at the bigger stadiums, the first two rounds, generally nothing happens because they're very reserved. They're giving space to the bettors to be able to balance out the odds, to figure out who their favorite is, so on and so forth. So the action generally doesn't start until mid to late round 3. And in some of the videos that get recorded, I know Muay Thai's, TIES, that channel specifically started recording at round 3 for 2 reasons. One, the action really didn't start there, so if he's showing you round 2, something probably happens. And 2, there was a recording limit on people that weren't part of the company anyway, and they wanted to be able to eliminate some of the coverage that wasn't officially part of Lumpini Stadium or Rajadamnern, so on and so forth. But you'll also notice that Muay Thai, depending on the stadium, will change, where you sometimes have Muay Thai in small gloves, you have sometimes Muay Thai that presses forward in the action, you get penalized for not fighting, versus the traditional sense where it's very relaxed, it's very calm, and even in the 5th round, sometimes not a lot happens because there's a mutual understanding that, hey, the fight's over, you clearly won, let's call it, as opposed to other organizations that may have the officials push the pace and make sure the action keeps going in order for the spectators to be able to benefit. So again, without a standardized rule set, it's really hard for the sport to grow because we don't know what it actually looks like. Now, if you take Muay Thai in the UK, for example, and you're going to hear me talk about Tony Myers a lot. So Professor Tony Myers has helped with judging and creating the criteria, translating over from what the late 90s looked like into a standard of how to judge and how to score Muay Thai. And that's since been carried on into the States and a couple other places as well, as he's performed seminars and worked with different athletic commissions to get everybody up to speed.
again with the knee causing his opponent to move, and body kick. Gets leg kick but not moved, so really out of those, the blue corner's still ahead in this series of exchanges. We're looking holistically rather than counting individual shots, but good score there by the blue corner, whipped the body kick in, on position, whipped the kick into his opponent's body.
With influence like that, you have something closer to a standardized rule set. So Muay Thai in the UK, in France, and other places are at least more consistent. And when you have a consistent subset, the sport can grow. And just on sheer numbers alone, you're going to see a lot more fights and fighters coming out of those regions as opposed to, let's say, in North America, where we're still sort of struggling to grow or understand the rule set. That and also MMA is sort of taken over. So again, going back to rule sets and different sports, you have MMA that's sort of taken over. And just based on the popularity alone, it's more common to have somebody who judges MMA or kickboxing spill over into judging Muay Thai fights. And that lack of understanding and that lack of standardization of rules, it's harder to really get everybody on the same page and understand what we're looking for. And the last point is going to be about styles, just on the research. If you know what the fighters look like stylistically, you kind of have an idea of how the fight may play out. Let's say you have Rotang, who is very heavy on the punches. He likes to go punches, low kick, and press forward. Let's say you have Panpayak, who's ironically from the same gym, who's very technical, but he hits hard. He's a really heavy kicker, but he's got longer reach, you know, a little bit of everything, that Fimu style. You know, if you take those two, it's going to be a different kind of collision. One's going to play smarter. The other one's going to be a lot more aggressive. All of a sudden, you have a guy that's pressing forward against someone who's going to be fighting backwards. Now, I can't really imagine a world where that fight would actually happen, just being they're from the same gym and all. But you get my point. Styles make fights. It's been tested time and time again, and it doesn't have to be Muay Thai specifically. MMA styles, obviously, your standard striker versus grappler setup, so on and so forth. I can go on and on about it. But if you know the styles, or if you can do some research about the particular fighter they're going up against, generally you have enough tape to be able to figure out where they're coming from and what their tendencies are. I'll offer you 3 different perspectives on how to watch the fight, and then I'll break down a little bit more specifically on how I'm watching fights, at least in the last 5 years or so. So you have to understand these 3 perspectives. Are you watching as a coach who's maybe scouting a particular fighter? Are you watching as a competitor or a fighter? Let's say you're looking for specific techniques or setups, you have a similar style, or you want to develop a different style. And the third one is really just watching casually as a fan. Are you just watching for fun? Now, it can't really hurt to know the rules and the rule sets and the styles and everything. The more you get into it, the more you take away from the fight. And whether you practice that sport is irrelevant. At least to my point right now, we're just watching fights. All right, moving on to the actual fight itself. The first thing that I do before I watch any sort of fight, if I can, as long as I'm not at a bar or something watching the fight live, if I watch some tape or recording or what have you, I'm going to mute the sound. I'm going to completely turn off any sound. A couple reasons. Commentary bias is very important. Sometimes they'll sort of sway you in the direction of what they think is happening or what they're seeing from their perspective. And again, if you have 3 judges, the commentary booth is usually technically the 4th judge, if you will. Their perspective is the unofficial scorecard. They're calling it as they see it. And they're also trying to be in the business of keeping you entertained. You have your standard play-by-play commentator, and then you have a color commentator. And typically the difference between the two is one's going to give you, all right, this is what's happening now. It should be more of an objective approach. And the color commentator is usually someone like Joe Rogan who likes to yell his head off and get excited over every little technique that happens. If you find that entertaining, great. But if you're trying to watch a fight objectively, it's hard to keep that bias out of there because they may over-exaggerate specific techniques. They may over-exaggerate whether somebody's hurt. And in your head, if you have your own scorecard, for example, it's going to be harder to pay attention to the specifics if you have a commentator sort of blasting in your ears about somebody being hurt or somebody needing to do something more, so on and so forth. On top of that, you have the crowd sound, depending on where they're fighting, whether they're booing, whether they're cheering, whether they're in Thailand and one side is cheering for the other, or they're betting on the person who's behind, so they're trying to get the person motivated by cheering him on. And also depending on the promotion, generally they have microphones that hang above the ring so you can actually hear the action. So for every kick, it might land on a bone, it might hit him on the thigh, it might hit him in the head. It makes a loud clapping sound. Even if it's not an effective technique, sometimes that sound can create a sort of audible bias in your head. Ooh, that sounded like it hurt. Now, I've seen a lot of techniques that knock out fighters that it didn't look or sound like anything, but I'm sure it felt a specific way or it landed a specific way that maybe didn't generate a sound and the person was knocked out. Sometimes there's delays and that sort of thing. So taking away that audible cue is important. And one more point, sometimes you just hear the corner yelling. Maybe they're yelling, hey, you're behind enough points. Hey, you got to do this. Hey, you're winning. How many coaches have we heard that were overconfident in telling their fighter, you're winning this fight, don't worry, it looks beautiful, and then they get their ass handed to them, and all of a sudden they lose a unanimous decision. Those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to avoid when I listen to the fight. Now, so a lot of fights that I watch, especially on YouTube, tend to have commentary in Thai. So unless they have some extreme emphasis on something, I have no idea what they're saying. So I'll just watch the fight and hope for the best. But even then, I still may mute it out just to stay focused. So the first thing I'll do is after I mute it is I'm going to watch the whole fight start to finish. If I have a specific favorite, let's say I enjoy Red Corner, I really love that person's fights, and I want to see them succeed, I'll try to cut the fight in half. What I mean by that is I'm going to watch as if I'm in the red corner. I'm either the coach or the fighter. I'm in the red corner. I'm looking at how they're approaching the fight, how they attack, how they defend, how they create a strategy around that other person. If I was fighting the blue corner, how would I handle that? Would I set up the hands and go to low kicks? Would I teep a lot? Would I keep my distance? Would I press forward? So on and so forth. That also allows you to sort of remove that bias when you rewatch a fight again from the blue corner's perspective. All of a sudden, now you're in the blue corner. You have a different fighting style. You have a different corner. You're going to fight the red corner and you're going to approach it differently. Sometimes you get a fight that's very evenly matched up, and those are very exciting to watch because there's tiny little details in those exchanges that you can really gain from. And once you build up your knowledge on being able to score that fight, maybe you'll be able to predict it right before the decision even happens, which might be my favorite part. So just to recap, when I'm watching the fight, the first thing I do is mute the sound. The second thing I do is I pick a side and I pretend I'm in that corner. The third thing I do is rewatch from the other corner. And if I have time and I got to watch that fight all over again, I'm going to watch it as a fan in its entirety. Technique for technique, I try to break it down as if I was that commentator trying to explain what's happening in the fight to somebody who maybe is not familiar with the sport. Breaking down the technique specifically, why I think they won it, and almost acting as an unofficial judge in that scenario. So let's take one of the older fights as a fun example. Now, fun fact about this fight, the guy in the red corner is Jean-Jacques Skarbowski. Skarbowski? I'm not going to get that right. He was a French kickboxer and Muay Thai champion, had about 80 fights, give or take, and was one of the Muay Thai coaches for Georges St. Pierre, who fought in the UFC. If you remember, a few years ago, he was actually featured in one episode of The Ultimate Fighter where he just beat the living hell out of everybody there. The comments mention John Charles about this fight in that he had a different opponent and really underestimated this opponent to the point where he was partying the night before or a few nights before and only found out that the last minute replacement was no one other than Buakaw. I don't know about you guys, but taking that news on a really short notice would probably freak me out a little bit. But he had said that his goal is to basically not gas out for this fight. So let's see how it plays out. I'm sure it was a lot of fun. I saw this probably a few years ago, but I figured it'd be a fun fight to rewatch. So right now, let's just take, I guess we'll call it the red corner. It's kind of confusing that they both have blue gloves. So let's use John Charles as the example. We're going to be in his corner trying to fight Buakaw. Now, Buakaw, we know, has great balance. He has a great teep. So it's all about the pacing here. So he's inching little by little, trying to get a gauge for that teep. We know he likes to catch. He's got a killer left hook, killer left kick, just great balance overall. Again, one of the greats in Muay Thai and kickboxing, especially when he moved over to K1 and sort of wiped out the division. So it's a lot of touch and feel, especially early on in the fight. I want to say this promotion is in China, but I could be wrong. Wait, Hong Kong Zoo? There you go. Is that just an ad? Let's say it's in Hong Kong. All right, so we'll kick for kick. He's already starting to look for the sweep. You can tell when he throws that right kick, he's trying to move it. Got a good teep. So the kick on an off timing. The left kick is sort of there to probe to see if he's balanced on that side. Throw a couple jabs to feel it out. Again, it's all about patience for this fight because we just partied for 2 days and all of a sudden we got to fight sort of the poster boy from Muay Thai in what, early 2000? Just imagine, we studied him, we studied his tapes, we know how he trains, we know how he fights. He likes the step and knee, a lot of stuff on the left side, great balance. Has a short clinch because I think around this time he was starting transition into kickboxing, so he didn't have a very long time to clinch. I think it's 1 second, 2 techniques, or 1 second, 1 technique, or something along those lines, as long as you stay active. Good counter, high left kick. So he's going to win that exchange. Again, this game is just inching in, taking our time, trying to figure out the distance. Now I'm going to pause for a split second here. So what I want you to notice is, this is a terrible color to do this in, hang on. What I want you to notice is this distance between the two fighters. Now, if they can teep each other, as an example, if they can teep each other, then they can probably land the high kick, low kick, just any sort of mid to long range attack. Now, that to me is about a 50-50 that he can attack and get countered. Now, what I'm noticing is John Charles is trying to inch his way in. Buakaw is keeping the teeps to just to keep him there. Or he's timing the high kick, the teep. There's a couple low kicks here and there as soon as John Charles is able to step in. So angling out just to get out of the corner. It's moving slightly. We're in range. We're just out of range, so he's stepping out. John Charles is actually probing with that jab. Buakaw is able to angle out and get away from the corner and away from the ropes. Eats a low kick for his troubles. He goes to return again on that offbeat. Now he's starting to put some combinations together. But early rounds can't really take a whole lot from them. Now, given that we've done our research, we know, again, John Charles was out partying and was supposed to fight some other, basically no-name opponent, and then just ended up last minute against Buakaw in his prime. It happens. It's, you know, that's Muay Thai for you. So now we're starting to get spicy with some of these kicks. Buakaw is actually really good at creating combinations with his kicks. It could be a left kick, right kick. It could be a kick, step, and knee. But he'll cover the distance really well just by stepping in off of that kick. A single shift or one step forward to be able to land that next, the next technique. Now, assuming we're in China for the fight, it is Muay Thai rules, but the judging and the pacing is going to be a little bit different. I think overall they're more welcome to have that really relaxed first and second round pace because they do respect the rule set. But I noticed the judging in China specifically tends to be a little bit more harsh for techniques. And I think they're pretty sharp, with the exception of having a bias for their hometown heroes, you know? Or in this case, we have a guy from France and a guy from Thailand, so anything goes for this fight. And this matchup in particular is very fascinating to me because Buakaw is known for closing the distance, but staying very long with his techniques. He has a long guard, long teep, long high kick. Just from there, he just pushes with that long guard. He sets up his low kick, likes to catch and sweep. Just very, very long techniques, long knee and everything. Whereas John Charles, I know, stylistically likes to sort of collapse and create these small collisions. He likes to make the fight really, really ugly, keep it really close. He's strong and very balanced. I just don't think he was ready for this pace, or especially this opponent. So you see how he starts to collide in, but he's got to separate a little bit. He's also focusing on not trying to gas out. So round two, a couple heaters. John Charles starting to look a little bit overwhelmed there. Buakaw is like another day in the office. So we're throwing some heaters around three. John Charles looking to press the action, sort of disregarding the teeps and being able to crash in. But Buakaw, especially at this point, was a serious problem with how he's able to kick, return kicks, just maintain balance overall. It seemed like he had an answer for everything. And it was usually the left kick. There wasn't a whole lot of right kicks that were being thrown. I don't know if that was just a preference or if he was naturally a southpaw growing up, but really, really favored that left kick unless he was throwing a low kick. Just had like an almost bladed stance unless he had that long guard. So you see how he's trying to work that forearm guard. He has a right hand in front of his face, and then the left hand just sort of extends out just to smother any sort of the boxing, and then right away he's primed and ready to be able to throw that kick. But notice how John Charles is starting to step in and make it really ugly for him. He may be returning, but now he's on the back foot. Like he's catching, sort of crashing in, goes straight to the clinch. But Buakaw, very popular for that body lock, which ended up working really well in K1 later on. By the way, if I have this timeline wrong, feel free to correct me on any of this. I'm not actually sure what year this fight was. Tries to throw their hands in return, but he's just eating so many other techniques. There's such a nice variation in technique. Might be a kick, might be some hands. It's not just a singular technique. He's already revving up for the next thing. Went for the body hook, overhand right, back to that left kick. Cross block is setting up. I might have accidentally switched sides just because I love Buakaw so much. But just the amount of things that he's throwing back, it's just got to be overwhelming. So given the background of the fight, and I apologize for skipping around a bit. It's not specifically supposed to be a fight breakdown. It's just some insight on how I'm viewing both sides of the fight. You know, if I was in Buakaw's corner versus in John Charles's corner, trying to get an idea for strategy. And again, doing your research on the individual fighter, what their style is like, what the rule set can be like, and then a location. Just going back to those few things. And if you use that as your general filter for most fights, you'll find them more enjoyable because you'll be able to take more away. And in turn, I think you'll be able to enjoy more fights. Thanks for watching, guys.